A very good evening and welcome to yet another edition of the program Times Exclusive here on Times Television. My name is Brian Banda. Thank you very much for joining us. The program tonight is coming to you courtesy of Rainbow Paints.
I love brilliant green on my walls. I love signal red, sweet lime, electric blue. I just love golden yellow.
You get all that and more at Rainbow Paints. Imagine a water-based paint that is water-resistant. Imagine a paint that is absolutely washable to remove dirt. And it guarantees you 10,000 cleaning scrubs over its lifespan without losing its luster. There can only be one paint that does just that, and that paint is acrylic sheen. Get yours today at all leading hardware stores. Rainbow Paints. Peace of mind. Part of the deal.
My guest tonight is American Ambassador to Malawi, Her Excellency Virginia Palmer. Madam Palmer, thank you very much for joining us again. We are meeting for probably the second time. We had a chat when you arrived. I hear that you'll be leaving the country soon.
I am leaving in the next couple of weeks, and indeed one of the first things I did in Malawi was come on Straight Talk.
Yeah, and you just vanished.
you scared me.
How has it been living in Malawi? 3 years now?
4.5.
Oh, 4.5?
Indeed.
It looks like just yesterday. How would you describe your stay in Malawi?
I have loved my time in Malawi. And the United States and Malawi have very strong relations, I think. Malawi is important to the United States as a stable democracy, as an exporter of security. Your military respects your constitution, and your peacekeepers fight bravely and protect civilians overseas. You're also important because you're one of a handful of countries that's going to reach HIV epidemic control by next year. So you're a model for a lot of positive things.
So you have great respect for our men in uniform.
I do.
And our fight in combating AIDS.
Indeed.
What do you think has been your major achievements in these 4.5 years, Your Excellency?
The two things I think that I am proudest of are the completion of the Millennium Challenge Compact, the $350 million compact to improve the transmission lines for electricity generation and reform Malawi's electricity sector or energy sector. And I think that will stimulate a lot of new investment in Malawi, particularly in the power sector. And the second thing is that we fought very hard to get the funding to build 200 new secondary schools.
Yeah.
And I think that growth in places in secondary schools will be really transformational for Malawi. It will help both boys and girls, but it will particularly, I think, bring girls into secondary school education.
Yeah.
And I think that will have a positive effect on the HIV epidemic too. And I think that Malawi can demonstrate to other African countries that investments in education will have really powerful public health benefits.
Let's talk about the Millennium Challenge. How do you look back at it? Do you think it was worth it?
You know, the Millennium Challenge Corporation board regarded the Malawian Compact as one of the most successful in the world. And I confess that there were times that I was not sure that it was going to get to that point. We had a lot of tough discussions about the need for reform of the energy sector, tough discussions about the need for a cost-reflective tariff. And it's still very important that ESCOM be financially viable so that private companies are interested in investing in new power plants to produce more electricity. But indeed, it wound up, the tough political decisions were taken, and the first compact wound up being extremely successful. And the scorecard that the Millennium Challenge Corporation does, which is how does a government govern on behalf of its people? Do you have macroeconomic stability? Do you have a free press? Malawi scored, are you fighting corruption? Malawi scored very high on all of those indicators. So those two things together set Malawi up to be eligible for a second compact.
The Malawi Millennium Challenge was focusing on electricity.
The first one, yes.
The first one. The second one is focusing on what?
The second one is a process. The first one focused on electricity because economists in Malawi and NGOs and politicians all met with Millennium Challenge economists and officials to determine what was the biggest constraint on Malawi's economy. And they determined in 2013 that power was what was keeping the economy from growing.
Yeah.
And so they decided, well, what can we do for power? You couldn't really build a power plant because the transmission lines couldn't accept the additional electricity. So they determined that we needed to improve the transmission grid and refurbish Nkula A, so that Nkula A didn't fail entirely.
Yeah.
So Nkula A put additional megawatts onto the grid, but now the grid is capable of taking additional generation from new power plants and also from buying power from Mozambique and Zambia. And what I'm hoping is that with additional investment in the power sector, that before too long, Malawi will be able to sell power to its neighbors.
So we might do away with blackouts, isn't it?
Indeed.
But
That's
we
certainly
are
the hope.
still experiencing blackouts.
Well, there are a few, and it's important, when all along people are like, well, you've spent a lot of money, why do I still have blackouts?
Yeah.
And again, I hope that as ESCOM is financially viable, as procurements are shaped up and there's good corporate governance at ESCOM, and more people are brought onto the grid, that problems will become less and less frequent. I think buying power from Zambia, which is not too far down the road, and the additional solar companies, some of which are American, I'm happy to say, coming online, will help to eliminate those problems.
So you are optimistic there will be a time, probably after you have gone, where we'll be able to have enough power actually sell the extra one.
Exactly.
Is that day going to happen in Malawi?
I believe it will. To a
How soon?
A Southern African power growth. You should rather ask that to ESCOM, I think, and to Genco.
Yeah.
But I'm confident that the day will come. Not right away. It takes a long time to build the megawatts onto the grid.
Yeah.
A hydro plant takes 5 years to build.
Yeah.
But I'm hopeful that as these power purchase agreements are signed, that more and more American companies in particular, and energy companies from all over the world, will say, ooh, look, Malawi is a good place to invest, and we'll start putting money into power generation. And when you have more power, and if the government maintains macroeconomic stability, you will have more and more investment, more and more job creation, and the economy will really take off. Sorry, but you asked me about the second compact.
Yeah, the second one. I was actually coming to
I'm
that
sorry,
one.
and I gave you a long story about the first one.
Yeah.
But now The Economist and Malawian Economist and some really prominent Malawians from across the political spectrum are on what's called a constraints analysis panel. So they're analyzing what the constraints on Malawi's economic growth are. It's kind of a fun conversation to have. If you had $500 million to fix what's keeping Malawi back, what would you spend the money on? I have that conversation at dinner every chance I get.
Yeah.
And so they're talking to economists here, they're talking to legal experts. They're going to come back in June and meet with civil society and sort of present their initial findings. And once there's agreement between the constraints panel, which is a Malawian, and the economists from the Millennium Challenge Corporation, then they will start to narrow it down and decide what they should work on, and then build a second compact. So decide what the project should be.
So they haven't decided yet?
No, sir.
Okay. So, but we have already passed the second one.
Well, you've been deemed eligible.
Okay.
Which is an important hurdle.
Okay.
And now we have to decide what it is that we should work on.
Okay.
And how much it will cost.
What would it be?
It could be anything. It could
Like
be
what?
Well, it could be railroad infrastructure, for example.
Okay.
It could be rural road infrastructure.
Okay.
It could be land reform associated with those things.
Okay.
I've talked to some people who've said, we still need more power generation. What about a power plant?
Yeah.
And I think the Millennium Challenge Compact isn't particularly interested in doing a power plant for two reasons. One is they don't want to crowd out private sector investment. So they want to put their money in areas that will make private sector investment possible, but not make it so that they're doing it instead of the private sector.
Yeah.
And also because power plants, as I mentioned, take 5 years. And the nature of the Millennium Challenge Compact is you do it for 5 years, then you put your shovel down.
Yeah.
So it must be done within
Within
that
5
certain
years,
time.
yeah.
So sometimes big investments like the power plant in particular are not particularly suitable for a compact.
Would you describe this a grant or a gift? to Malawians? Are we going to
Yeah,
pay
it's
back this month?
No, you don't. It's a grant.
Oh, so it's a grant.
Yes.
So we don't owe you anything.
No.
Okay. Do you consider this as one of your achievements?
Well, not my personal achievement,
Yeah.
but Malawi's achievement, and I've been pleased to be here to witness it, and to give a little poke every now and then
Yeah.
to say, wow, we really need to look at electricity sector reform.
What about financial management? Did we manage these funds all right?
Oh, of the Millennium Challenge
Yeah,
Compact?
yeah.
Absolutely, yes.
You didn't have any queries, no red lights?
Well, there are regular audits.
Yeah.
But indeed, that money was very well spent.
What would you recommend we do with the second compact?
Well, I do think it's up to Malawians to
Yeah, but
decide.
you can give a recommendation.
Well, I think that some of the direction about infrastructure
Yeah.
and rail and road infrastructure is going to be very important. And that there could be some additional reform elements, like the first compact had reform of the electricity sector as part of it. If implementing the land reforms that Malawi has passed but not fully implemented would be an important element of that, for example.
Mm-hmm.
That if you were able to fully implement land reform, it might make some of the other investments in infrastructure work better. I think based on Malawi's good experience in the first compact, Washington and the Millennium Challenge Corporation are looking to couple those elements of project finance as well as reform.
How did we qualify for the 200 secondary schools?
Well, it wasn't a qualify so much. It was I got a call from the Global AIDS Coordinator in the American government and the Ambassador at Large for Women's Affairs.
Okay.
And they said, what can we do to break the cycle of transmission of AIDS from older men to younger girls who then give it to boys their own age or men their own age?
Yeah.
And that transmission link is a very important one. If you don't break that link, you won't get ahead of the AIDS epidemic. So we sat around at the embassy with our Malawian and American employees and said, what can we do that's really bold, that will break that link and break the cycle and help Malawi and be transformative? And girl-child education is a very important element of that. If girls stay in school, they will make smarter decisions about their health and for their families. And so it's going to be very important, I think, because Malawi is going to prove to the rest of the world. There's been some evidence in Botswana, but never a big system-wide study, that keeping a girl in school will help prevent her lifetime risk of HIV. So indeed, we are using HIV money for education, which is a little revolutionary and exciting. But what we're going to do is we're going to expand 50 secondary schools in Lilongwe and Blantyre, because that's where your HIV epidemic is concentrated. And then over the next 3 years, after that initial year of 50 schools expansion, we're going to build an additional 150 greenfield high schools, meaning it will have 4 classrooms for each of the grades and a teacher's office and teachers' houses, 2 teachers' houses, and a laboratory. And it will expand the number of places in school for boys and girls by 25%.
Oh, that's good.
And I think it will achieve great things. And as we discussed that with the government of Malawi, the government of Malawi agreed sort of to support that investment by waiving secondary school tuition, which is, again, hugely important, I think. And I really appreciate that the government of Malawi did that. The idea that a kid wouldn't be able to go to school because they didn't have 30,000 kwacha is heartbreaking. And so eliminating that will really help Malawi achieve its SDG goals. They agreed that they would put youth-friendly health services near schools, that they would hire and train the additional teachers that are required, that they would have comprehensive sex education in schools, and that they would have gender-based violence-free zones at the schools. So the steps that the Malawi government is taking in cooperation with the additional investments that we will make for secondary education, I think will have enormous benefits for the education system and the health of Malawi's young people.
There should be areas that you are probably impressed with the strides we have made as a country, and that will be followed by whether there are areas of improvement. But I want us to encourage us as a country. Where are we doing right as a country?
There are a lot of places.
There are a lot of places?
There are. I think the number one thing, when I arrived in Malawi, inflation was way over 20%.
Yeah.
Now it's under 10%. And the single worst thing for poor people is what? It's not bad education. It's not bad health care. Those things are bad for poor people. But the single worst thing for a poor person is inflation.
Okay.
Because it means that that what little money they make won't buy as much as it did the year before.
Yeah.
And if they have managed to save enough for a goat, then they'll have to sell the goat to pay the school fees. They can't get ahead if inflation is eroding their gains. Inflation also means you can't get a loan to start a small business, all those things. So the government's steps to stick with the IMF program and to maintain macroeconomic control and stability are very important for all of Malawi's people. So I give a lot of credit to that. It was very tough to do. It's tough to control spending. But the government and the Reserve Bank of Malawi took some really bold steps, and I salute that. That's one thing.
Yeah.
I mentioned a couple of things at the top about HIV control.
Yeah.
The Ministry of Health and Minister Maluzi did some really bold things. Test and treat. So that people get medicine as soon as they find out they're HIV positive. And that medicine can make them live a healthy life.
That's right.
And stop the spread of HIV too. So protect the people they love. That's enormously important. And
So we have made great strides in that area.
you're leading the world in that area.
Oh, yeah?
Yes.
Okay.
And again, to your very great credit, and with very few resources. So your boldness in the fight against HIV is something I really salute. Your peacekeepers do a beautiful job.
I'm told, yes.
Yes. And I mean, there are many other areas. You've done some really remarkable laws. You've taken the step of raising the age of majority for marriage and changed the Constitution so that girls and boys have to be older when they get married. And that has helped reduce. Malawi was the 11th highest rate of child marriage in the world. And that is improving thanks to some legal reforms that you've made.
So we have some success stories as a country.
Absolutely.
What about areas of improvement?
Well, I think it's more areas of full implementation. Like you've taken some steps.
Yeah.
I have been a little frustrated in my 4.5 years here because people have said, Ambassador, we've done it. And then they pause for a minute and they say, except for the implementation. And I'm like, oh, my brother, implementation is it. It must be fully implemented. And I think public sector reform is one of those areas. That could be President Mutharika's legacy. It's a very important thing that services, most of Malawi's civil servants are doing a great job under difficult circumstances. But the ones that are not should be held accountable. And services should be delivered. And that's true at senior levels if there is corruption or fraud, but it's also true at lower levels. And ordinary Malawians ought to be angry and say, wait a minute, my wife died in childbirth because the clinical worker who was supposed to be here at 8 o'clock didn't get here till 11. Why are there not consequences for that? So I think public sector reform and the full implementation of that is enormously important. And I would add the sort of quest for accountability to that. I also think, if I may speak frankly, and I do love Malawi.
If you may, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think that Malawi's biggest problem isn't poverty. Poverty is a big problem, but I think the lack of accountability is your most serious problem, and that really does need to be addressed.
Like we don't follow the money.
Exactly. There need to be consequences when money is misused because you have scarce resources, you have a lot of poor people who need things very badly, and the economy needs to be protected. The private sector needs to be protected.
So who is to blame for that? We have the laws, but they are not being worked on.
Well, I think more can be done to increase the increase the independence. There have been some steps in that direction, but to increase the independence of the accountability institutions, the Anti-Corruption Bureau, the Financial Intelligence Authority, even the Director of Public Prosecutions. They need more resources. They need to be able to follow through on their investigations.
So we still have a problem with corruption.
You do.
What can we do as a country?
Well, you can hold people accountable. If they have misused funds, fire them. It's in the law.
Yeah.
You have the capability.
But we don't seem to fire people.
Well, I think it's kind of cultural. You're nice people. You don't like to do these things that are harsh.
Yeah.
But I think a few steps would blow.
Do you think firing
even.
people could solve this problem?
I do. I think in some cases it needs to be worse than firing people. People need to be brought to justice.
And arrested.
Yes.
Yeah.
If they are stealing money from a clinic, which means that poor people are having to go and buy the medicine in the market,
Yeah, that's right.
they need to go to jail.
But what are you doing as an American government to help us on that?
Well, in the area
I'm
of
talking
drug,
about corruption.
yes, indeed.
Yeah.
In the area of drug theft in particular, which
Yeah.
is a kind of corruption, we have helped with the drug theft unit at the Ministry of Health. We set up a hotline. We've put advertisements in the newspaper. I don't know if people have seen. I had to go on TV 3 years ago and say I was going to close clinics where they had dispensed or they could not account for 10 times more drugs than they had cases of malaria. And I said, "Oh, I don't want to do this. People will die."
Yeah.
But they're not going to die because I've taken a tough decision. They're dying because thieves are stealing the medicine
Yeah.
that the United States government has paid for.
But it's not only in hospitals. We have thieves in government.
Well, in this case, I think it was government workers in hospitals.
Okay. But maybe at Capitol Hill, people inflating numbers. The road which would have cost us 2 million, for example, we are paying 5 million.
Yeah.
Where's the other money going?
I think wherever it occurs, it must be addressed. It must be, people must be brought to book, and that will help prevent corruption, I think.
We have to take a short break. Ambassador Palmer will be back with
Thank you,
you
Brian.
in a moment. In case you're just joining us, this is Times Exclusive, airing on Times Television. My name is Brian Banda. We are privileged today. We are in conversation with Excellency Virginia Palmer, American Ambassador to Malawi. She's winding up. In a couple of weeks, she'll be heading back home. So she probably came to say goodbye. So we'll take a short break. We'll be back momentarily.
I love brilliant green on my walls. I love signal red, sweet lime, electric blue. I just love golden yellow.
You get all that and more at Rainbow Paints. Imagine a water-based paint that is water-resistant. Imagine a paint that is absolutely washable to remove dirt. And it guarantees you 10,000 cleaning scrubs over its lifespan without losing its luster. There can only be one paint that does just that, and that paint is acrylic sheen. Get yours today at all leading hardware stores. Rainbow Paints. Peace of mind. Part of the deal.
You're watching Times Exclusive on Times Network. I'm joined by Her Excellency Virginia Palmer, American Ambassador to Malawi. She's actually winding up her tour of duty, but she came to say bye-bye before she leaves in the next a few weeks. Welcome back to the other half of the program.
Thank you, Brian.
You have been in the country 4.5 years. A lot of people might say you have been very close to President Mutharika. Was he your personal friend?
You know, I like to think so. I like him very much. And we have something very unique in common. I went to the university in the United States where he taught for 39 years.
I see.
And I was appointed before President Mutharika was elected. So
Okay.
we didn't plan it that way.
Okay.
We're not smart enough to
So
set it up.
you knew him before you came?
I didn't.
Okay.
But it's quite something to have in common, 10,000 miles away from St. Louis.
That's right.
So when I first met him, I presented credentials, which is a very formal occasion.
Yeah.
And I said, "Mr. President, this isn't normal at such a formal occasion, but I have brought you a T-shirt from Washington University and
Yeah.
a tie." And that did strike off
Yeah.
a nice sort of relationship, I think.
How
And
often did you meet him?
well, whenever there was important business that needed to go on between the United States and
Yeah.
Malawi, and then I saw him at big events when he was presiding
Because
over big
a
events.
lot of people have said that you almost attended every function President Mutharika held, and people were saying, wasn't that too much as a diplomat? Or didn't you take sides in as far as his policies or maybe ideologies, party lines are concerned?
Well, the United States government talks to all of the parties in Malawi.
Okay.
And I went to the functions that the president of Malawi would invite a diplomat to.
That's right.
That's not picking sides.
Okay. Have you, during your stay in Malawi, were you also in touch with other presidents of various political parties?
Indeed.
What were you talking about?
Well, the matters of national importance.
Like what?
Well, like electricity policy and interest rate policies and peacekeeping and what's happening in the United States, all kinds of things.
What kind of trade agreements can we make with America, and if there are any that you have made whilst you were here?
Well, we haven't had any specific trade agreements because you haven't needed one, frankly. You have the African Growth and Opportunity Act, which allows duty-free entry of all Malawian products, basically, into the United States. And I think there is more that Malawi could do to take advantage of that.
Like what? What do you think would be saleable in America from Malawi?
Well, right now, what you mostly sell is tobacco, of course.
Okay.
You also sell macadamia nuts, tea,
I
coffee.
see. Okay.
I think there is more that could be done in those, and sugar, excuse me, I should have mentioned sugar. More that could be done to expand those markets. And as we talked about earlier, as Malawi has more electricity and more manufacturing, I think there will be more processed agricultural goods that could be exported to the United States. I think there's potential for the export of handicrafts as well.
Okay.
Malawi's beautiful fabrics.
Is this from Malawi?
It is indeed.
Oh, look, it looks very good on you, actually. I was thinking it's from Indiana.
Oh, no. I will show these off when I go home to America.
Okay. Let's talk about the rights. Do you think we are making significant strides in promoting both civil and human rights?
I think you have. I think President Mutharika is very committed to human rights. I think there have been some really good laws that have been passed in Malawi, as we discussed, raising the age of majority, working to end child marriage, working to end trafficking in persons. I think more could be done. Malawi ranks something like 171 out of 183 on the Gender Inequality Index, which means that despite having equal rights, the role of women, particularly in the village, is not equal to the role of the Malawian men. And I think that more that women are empowered, the better decisions they will make for their families. Their families will be stronger, their communities will be stronger, and Malawi will be stronger.
What about gay rights?
There's no such thing as gay rights.
Okay.
What we're talking about is people who are homosexual having the same human rights that you and I enjoy, that they enjoy peace in their homes and are not interfered with, and that they enjoy the same rights as other Malawian citizens.
Yeah.
The same is true for people living with albinism, who again are quite persecuted in some instances. And the only thing that's different between me and you and a person with albinism is that we have more melanin in our skin.
Yeah.
And so we need to work harder in both the United States and Malawi so that ordinary people understand that.
We still have the laws that criminalize people that would want to enjoy those rights. Has there been a time that you have been, at loggerheads with our government on the same?
I have
because your government view this differently compared to our governments. I
have called for the government of Malawi to honor its international human rights commitments and its constitutional commitments. That's all I've said. There's been some talk that the United States was advocating gay marriage, which we haven't. We've simply said we think that every citizen of Malawi should have the same rights as other citizens of Malawi. Sometimes
we talked about this when you came 4.5 years ago, that sometimes the worry amongst Malawians is that you sometimes attach your aid to these rights. Yeah. Do you think it's fair?
We don't attach our aids to those rights.
Okay.
But
you don't?
No.
You have never?
No. And there are no conditions on American aid. But we believe that development investments will pay better returns. You will get more development with money invested in countries that respect the civil rights of their countries. In the Millennium Challenge Compact, that scorecard that we talked about has essentially government governing well on behalf of its people. And the way you measure that is, do you have the right to vote? Do you have, rights against, do you have a fight against corruption? Do you have a free press? Are people jailed arbitrarily? No. And so we believe that countries that respect the rights of their citizens are inherently more stable and will therefore be more prosperous. So that investments in those countries, whether they be from the private sector or government spending, will be better spent in those countries.
Let's talk about, by the time we are taping this interview, we are still waiting for the results for presidential elections, and I believe that by the time we air, we might have a new president. But let's talk about the process. How have you seen the electoral process in Malawi, especially in this election?
Thank you. I'm very happy to have a chance to comment on that.
Yeah.
I have been deeply impressed over the months with the preparations that the Malawi Electoral Commission has made for these elections. I think there were very strong lessons learned after the 2014 elections, and the European Union election observers this morning said that 80% of those recommendations had been implemented. I think that having the national ID card and using the national ID card as a means of identification for voter registration were very powerful, and that Malawi had the best voter registration exercise it's had in history. I was impressed that polling materials got to all of the polling stations on time, and that almost all of the polling stations opened on time. If there were short delays, they were compensated for at the other end.
Yeah.
I flew all over Malawi on election day and visited more than a dozen polling stations personally, and then had teams in all of the hot spots.
Yeah.
And we saw party monitors at all of the places. We saw police and the soldiers doing what they should be doing. We stayed and looked at counting exercise, sometimes carried on in lantern light.
Yeah.
And it was very moving, in fact, the patriotic and democratic exercise that we were able to witness.
So you are impressed?
I was impressed. And I'm sure there will be problems and
Yeah.
there will be complaints, but I think the processes for dealing with those complaints are in order. And I think that the other thing that we need to bear in mind, it's very important right now, 2 days after the election,
Yeah.
that the MEC has put in place many procedures to safeguard the results, to make sure that they are recorded properly and then transmitted to tally centers and the National Tally Center properly. And that those safeguards and that transparency take time. So we need to give the MEC the time they need to do it right.
What about women? We have seen that a lot of women, they have fallen. In these elections, we had strategies to put more women in power. It seems it's not working. Where are we getting it wrong so that we cannot put more women in parliament?
I think if I can be frank, I think the 50-50 campaign didn't achieve its objectives. But I think I haven't heard a full report about how many women were elected to parliament, for example.
Yeah.
So that may still be good news. I think the bottom line is that it's not an exercise that is run for a few months. It's a continuous exercise. It begins with girl-child education, so that girls can be numerate and literate and understand that they can stick up for themselves and for the things they believe in. I think it has to do with training that women politicians need and how to raise money, how to address a group larger than a classroom, how to articulate policies in ways that are appealing to constituents and that constituents can understand. I think it's an ongoing process.
Do you think men are more advantaged?
I think in many ways, in Malawi, men are more
What about in
advantaged.
America?
Oh, I think it's improving, not as fast as I would like.
Okay. So American women, especially those that aspire for political leadership, are better off compared to Malawi.
That's a tough question to answer because, in fact, your representation in Parliament was better than ours.
Okay.
So I have to have some humility about this.
Yeah, that's right.
But in general, I think there's no gender-based violence in American campaigns.
Okay.
For example, and women are not discouraged from running because they're women. But we haven't had women. We've only once had a woman presidential challenger. I'd like to see that happen more often. I'd like to see more women represented in our Congress.
Will President Trump build that wall?
We'll have to wait and see, Brian.
Why are you hesitant to answer
Because you
that?
didn't tell me you were going to ask me.
Do you think, and I know this one, it's a difficult one for you, America has for a long time been welcoming. A lot of people have said that why not build bridges and not building a wall?
You know, I would like to stress that I think America still is welcoming. I'm married to an immigrant. One of America's greatest strengths is that my husband, who was born in South Africa, is as American as I am.
Okay.
He has the same rights. He is regarded as American, just as I am. My family's been in the United States for 400 years.
Yeah.
And I think that America is made strong by our immigrants and by our refugees, and we shouldn't lose sight of that. And I think there's a legal difference and a practical difference between someone who is legally applying for political asylum, which is legal, and someone who is illegally in the United States for economic reasons, for example, who has essentially jumped the queue.
The worry amongst many Malawians is that you have tightened the knots. It's becoming more difficult to get the American visa.
There's a point at which, if people overstay,
Yeah.
if they get a visa to go to America for 3 months,
Yeah.
and they stay 15 years,
Okay.
if there's too much of that, then there are things that have to click in according to American law, and we want to avoid that. So we do what's called a validation study, and we look at the visas that we've issued, and we see if people have come back when they say they're coming back.
Are they coming back when they say they're coming
It's
back?
higher than I would like. So more people are staying longer than is proper.
But they do come back.
Many come back, and it's totally fine. And
Yeah.
we encourage tourism to the United States.
Yeah.
Encourage people to go for business.
Yeah.
There are people who stay too long, and they queer it for other people who want to go for legitimate reasons.
But you come here freely.
Well, you tell us how long we can stay when we enter.
Oh.
It says how many days.
Yeah,
you're
but
allowed
it's
to stay.
more easier to get the Malawian visa than it is to get the American visa, Your
Oh,
Excellency.
I don't know about
No, I'm telling you. I'm telling you because I know. I know. Do you think it,
Let me just assure people
Yeah.
that if you are going for a short stay for work or study or pleasure, you are warmly welcome. If you say you're going to go for a short stay, but your intention is to go forever, then you probably won't get a visa.
how do you know that this one is going to overstay?
Well, they have criteria that they look at.
So
Yeah.
they know what they are doing.
Yes.
Okay, but do you think it's going to be softened in the near future?
Softened?
Yeah, softened.
No. Well, the criteria is worldwide. It applies all over. So I think it will be like it has been.
Okay.
Again, with the door open to people with legitimate business and travel and study.
Where
across
to
together.
after Malawi?
Me?
Yes.
I'm going to Washington. I'm going to be vice chancellor of one of our defense universities for a couple of years, and then we'll see.
If you are given an opportunity to come back to Malawi, would you take it, Your Excellency?
I most certainly would. But you're very much going to like my successor. His name is Rob Scott.
Okay.
He's a diplomat like I am by career.
So you are a career diplomat.
I am, yes.
Yeah.
And Rob has been in the neighborhood. He was the deputy ambassador in Zimbabwe and in Dar es Salaam.
Okay.
So he, like me, has been working his way toward Malawi. And I hope that he will love Malawi as I have. I'm confident that he will.
2-3 things that you always remember about Malawi, away from your job.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, away from my job.
Yeah.
Actually, well, I'll talk about just a couple of experiences and then maybe things that have made a deep impression on me.
Yeah.
One of the coolest expressions I've
Coolest?
Yeah, really experiences that I ever had in my life
Yeah.
was I participated in the wildlife relocation of the elephants from Luandi to Nkoma,
Yeah.
and then from Majeti to Nkoma. It was the largest relocation of wildlife in history.
Yeah.
Again, something else that Malawi should be very proud of.
Yeah.
And we rode around in a helicopter and listened to the vet and the helicopter pilot talk to each other about how to isolate the mother or the maternal
Yeah.
leader of the elephant family and dart her. And then we landed and then ran to the elephant, and I got to touch her and keep the sun out of her eyes while they did all the testing. And that was really exciting. And then the other experiences in Malawi, such a beautiful country. I've enjoyed seeing things, but I've been really moved by meeting people who walk 12 kilometers to go to school, to get an education, or making real sacrifices to learn. And that's something I want to tell American children and funders and about people appreciating education and making real sacrifices to achieve it. I've also stood in line. I remember being pulled over because there was a presidential motorcade, so I had to
Yeah.
wait for 20 minutes.
And this is the American ambassador
Indeed.
being put outside.
And I was like, I have to wait. And but then I got to watching the crowd, and everybody was very friendly. And I remember a man selling carrots. Give some carrots to a beggar.
Yeah.
And I thought, that man doesn't have much money.
Yeah.
But he is sharing.
We
what
are
he
givers.
has.
We are givers.
Indeed, poor
Yeah.
people give money to beggars. And,
Yeah.
and that I just found that very moving. This is indeed the warm heart of Africa, and you are the nicest people on the planet.
And that's why you're coming back if you're
I
given a
hope so.
chance. 3 things that you're packing to America.
Oh, from
3
Malawi?
Yeah, from Malawi.
Ooh, Chitenji fabric.
Okay.
Malawi gin.
Malawi gin.
Indeed, Malawi gin is good stuff. and taking some Mzuzu coffee too.
Or some Zuzu coffee.
Yes.
You have been in the country 4.5 years. Can you give me a sentence in Chichewa?
Mapunzira indi funika. Indio funika. Maka mapunzira atikana.
Oh, that's a good one. Ambassador Virginia Palmer, quite intriguing hearing you talk tonight. We wish we had more time. And thank you very much for coming to Blantyre, not only to coming to Blantyre, but also to see us and say your goodbyes. We wish you the best of luck. So I'm talking to the future, not the future, the Vice Chancellor
yes, sir.
of a military university. Did
yes,
you
sir.
say that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so one day I'll come and visit you at the university. Thank you very much indeed. We wish you the best of luck.
Thank you.
Well, on that note, we conclude this week's edition of Times Exclusive. In this edition, I was talking to Her Excellency Ambassador Virginia Palmer, American Ambassador to Malawi. She's finalizing her tour of duty. We wish her the very best of her future endeavors. This has been Times Exclusive. My name is Brian Banda, wishing you the very best of the evening, and goodbye.